Hi everyone, my name is McKenna Martin. I am a occupational therapy student at Trinity Washington University, and today I'm going to go over some goniometry. As occupational therapists, we use the goniometer, such as this one, to measure range of motion. This tells us how mobile someone's joints are. We have one like this. They all come in all different sizes. Obviously this one we use for larger joints. This small one we use for the finger joints to measure the range of motion at each joint on the finger. Today I have asked my good manager Ashley to demonstrate and allow me to show you how to use the goniometer at different joints. So the first joint we'll take a look at is the shoulder, and we will look at shoulder flexion. Shoulder flexion, you will have the client seated or in the supine position. You will ask the client to raise their hand directly in front of them, up as far as they can go. The normal degrees per the 7th edition Pedretti book is 0 to 170. Ashley's results showed 120 degrees of shoulder flexion. And when you are placing the goniometer on the shoulder, you want to make sure that the axis is on the humeral head, and the immovable arm, which is the one with the straight line, will stay stationary on the axis of the body, while the movable arm will follow the humerus as it goes all the way to the top. Okay, Ashley, I'm going to have you raise your hand as far as you can go. Alright, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Keep going, keep going. Is that as far as you can get? Good job. So next we will look at shoulder extension, and per the Pedretti 7th edition book, the range is 0 to 60 degrees of shoulder extension. This can be done in the seated or in the prone position. You just want to ensure that there is nothing behind the client to obstruct them from extending their arm backwards. The axis is still on the humeral head. The stationary arm, the one with no numbers, will be on the axis of the body, and the numbered movable arm will follow the humerus as it extends backwards. It's just like in shoulder flexion, however, you will obviously just be moving in the opposite direction. Ashley's results of the shoulder extension were 30 degrees of shoulder extension. Therefore, she may could benefit from some exercises or stretches that would allow her to extend to fully or close to the 60 degrees of shoulder extension. Alright, Ashley, now I'm going to have you bring your arm behind you as far as you can go. Is that it? Next we will look at shoulder AB or abduction. You will have the client in the seated or in the supine position. You will ask them to bring their arm out to the side and as far up as they possibly can. They are moving in the frontal plane, and you want to ensure that you are behind or in front of the client so that you can follow them along that frontal plane. In the Pedrati book, it suggests that the range is from 0 to 170 degrees of shoulder abduction. Ashley's results were actually over. They were 175 degrees of shoulder abduction. So that was good. This time, Ashley, I want you to bring your hand all the way out to the side and up to the ceiling. Ready, set, go. Keep going, keep going. All right. Is that painful? No, great job. Alright, for this one, I want you to bring your pinky to your belly. Good job. This time, you're going to take your palm as far down as you can go while keeping your elbow up. With shoulder external rotation, again, you will place the axis on the olecranon process of the elbow. There's also two ways to do this. You could have the client abducted with their elbow at 90 degrees, and you'll ask them to bring their hand to the back, or you can have it adducted to the side, and you can have them bring it out to the side. This seems repetitive, but the single line stays stationary while this follows the motion of the arm moving out and away from the body. Per the Pedretti book, the degree of external rotation is between 0 and 90 degrees. Ashley's results were over. They were they were 95 degrees of external rotation. Now you'll take the back of your hand as far back as you can go while keeping your elbow up. Great job. With your palm up, I want you to take your thumb as far out to the side as you can get it. Great job. Next, we will look at elbow flexion. Elbow flexion can be done in the seated, supine, or in the standing position. You want the client to ensure that their humerus is fully adducted to their side and they start with their arms straight. You will ask the client to bring their hand to their shoulder. You will place the axis on the lateral side of the elbow. The stationary arm of the goniometer, which is the one that doesn't have the numbers on it, will be parallel to the humerus. The movable arm will follow the forearm to the shoulder, and this will give you the degree of elbow flexion. Per the Pedretti book, the degree of elbow flexion is between 0 and 135 or 140 degrees. Ashley's results were 145 degrees of elbow flexion. Now I want you to bring your hand all the way up to touch your shoulder. Good. Next we'll look at wrist flexion. With wrist flexion, you want to have a table available and have the client rest their forearm on the table. You want their fingers relaxed and extended. The normal degree is 0 to 80 degrees of wrist flexion. You want their wrist in a neutral position, and the medial side or pinky side on the table. You'll then ask the client to keep their fingers straight and bring their palm towards them. When you do this measurement, you want to place the axis on the lateral aspect of the wrist, just distal to the radial styloid. The immovable arm will stay along the radius, and the movable will be parallel to the metacarpal of the index finger. Ashley's results were 70 degrees of wrist flexion. Okay, for the wrist, I want you to keep your fingers straight, and I want you to bring your palm towards you. Keep going. Is that all we got? Alright. Good job. Next, we will look at wrist extension. The same concept applies. You want the client's elbow rested on the table, their wrist in neutral position with their fingers relaxed and extended. You'll ask the client to bring the backside of their hand towards whatever object or whoever's standing there, or you could say back towards their wrist or the back of their arm. The normal range per the pediatric book is 0 to 70 degrees. Ashley's results were 75 degrees of wrist extension. For this wrist measurement, I want you to keep your fingers straight, and I want you to take the back of your hand and bring it out towards me. Awesome. Perfect. Next we will look at radial deviation. You will want the client seated with their forearm rested on the table, and you want them in pronation with their hand flat on the table. You want their wrist in a neutral position. The normal degree is 0 to 20. You want the axis at the base of the third metacarpal over the capitate bone, and the immovable arm or stationary arm will be on the dorsal side of the forearm, and the movable arm will be parallel to the third metacarpal, so it will be straight like this, and then when they move, you'll follow them to the radial side. You'll just ask the client to bring their thumb as closest to them as they can. Ashley's results were 20 degrees of radial deviation. Okay, while keeping your hand flat, I want you to move your thumb towards you. Great job. Keep your fingers down. Awesome. Perfect. Next, in ulnar deviation, per the Pedretti book, the degree is 0 to 30. The same rules apply as in radial deviation, and the goniometer is in the same position. Ashley's results were 35 degrees of ulnar deviation. You will just tell the client to bring their pinky as close to them as possible. While keeping your fingers flat, move your pinky towards me. Keep your fingers on the table, Good job. Next we will look at finger MCP flexion. This is between the metacarpal and the phalangeal joint. In the textbook it says that the normal flexion is between 0 and 90 degrees. Ashley's results were 80 degrees of MCP flexion. You want to ask the client to have their forearm rested on the table, and you want them to make a really tight fist. Then this is when we use the small goniometer. The stationary arm which is the big part, will be placed on the metacarpal, and the movable arm will be on the proximal phalanx, and you will make sure that the axis is along the top of the joint that you're measuring. You can measure each of the joints individually to better understand how movable each finger is at that joint. Now we will test your fingers, so I want you to make a really tight fist. Tight squeeze. Here we go. Next we will look at the PIP joint, which is this joint. You will have the client make a bear claw and you will have them rest their forearm on the table with their elbows supported. The stationary part of the goniometer will go along the proximal phalanx, and the movable arm will go across the middle phalanx, and per the Pedretti book, it's between 100 and 110 degrees of PIP flexion. Ashley's results were 95 degrees of PIP flexion. For this finger measurement, I want you to make a bare fist and only do the first two knuckles. Lastly, we will look at finger DIP flexion. Per the Pedretti book, the range is between 0 and 180 degrees of DIP flexion. Ashley's results were exactly 80 degrees of DIP flexion. You want the client, again, seated with their forearm in mid position and the wrist at 0 degrees. You want them to be in the bear claw position again. The immovable arm will be on the middle phalanx, and the movable arm will be on the distal phalanx. You will measure the degree of the distal interphalangeal joint, which is the top joint of the finger, and that's it. Thanks for watching.